Alright guys, welcome back. Today we're covering part 2 of matter and its properties. Last time what we covered was matter, its phases, and the difference between pure compounds and mixtures. Today we'll go one step further and talk about physical versus chemical properties, as well as intensive versus extensive properties. These are also level 1 topics, and like the previous goals that we covered in part 1, they're pretty isolated, so we won't be seeing them again in future chapters. So take these 3 points and make sure to study well. Now, onto the lesson. Last time what we discussed was matter is a pretty big umbrella term, and we need to classify that said matter. One such classification was pure compounds versus mixtures. This time we'll cover the other classifications you need to know for Gen Chem 1, and that's intensive versus extensive, and chemical versus physical properties. Let's start with intensive versus extensive. Intensive properties do not depend on the amount of matter present. This means if we have 1 gram of matter, adding another 1000 kgs of that same matter does not affect the property. An example of this would be temperature. If I had 1 gram of iron and it was 70 degrees Celsius, adding a kg of 70 degrees Celsius iron will not shift the temperature. We can also look at phase. If I have ice, basically frozen water, adding more ice will not make it room temperature water. It will stay in the same phase. Conversely, extensive properties depend on the amount of matter present. Basically, different amounts of matter will affect the property, and an example of this could be mass or even volume. If I have more iron, it'll probably have a larger mass, and it'll also have a larger amount of volume. Now, you'll usually get test questions that probably list like a property like color and ask you, is it intensive or is it extensive? Try not to get fooled when you come across this. Try to look at it more objectively. If I add more of this, will I get more of the property or less of the property? In color's case, color is an extensive property. Now, the next set of properties we'll come across is physical and chemical properties. For these properties, we test whether the property is affected with chemical composition. Let's look at physical properties. Physical properties reference changes made to the physical components of matter. In other words, they describe properties that do not relate to the chemical composition. For example, density or hardness. These are physical properties as they don't relate to changing the chemical identity. On the other hand, chemical properties reference changes that affect the chemical composition. This very clearly changes the chemical identity, for example, when we see flammability or acidity. Let's take a piece of plastic, an example. We can have more dense pieces of plastic and we can have less dense pieces of plastic. That makes density a physical property because at the end of the day, it's still plastic. On the other hand, with flammability, when we burn plastic, we're not going to end up with plastic again. The basic idea is, if we make a new element or we affect the chemical composition of that property, then it's a chemical property. Otherwise, it's a physical property. Now, you're going to be asked about chemical and physical changes. These are extensions of the properties I just described. Rotting and digesting are chemical changes, while grinding and magnetizing are physical changes. Simply try to think whether it's a physical or chemical property, and then proceed how the questions ask. Anyways, this will be all in terms of describing properties. This should be all you need to know for matter for your first test. Please like and subscribe, and good luck. Thank you.